Welcome back to the Hydrogen Studies podcast. Today, we're diving into the kidneys, organs that don't always get the spotlight, but quietly shape our health every minute. They filter blood, balance electrolytes, regulate blood pressure, and help us detox. But they're also vulnerable, especially to oxidative stress. Molecular hydrogen may be the key to kidney stress, inflammation, and cellular resilience. Let's take a closer look. This is the Hydrogen Studies podcast, sponsored by Echo Water. The kidneys are some of the most hardworking organs in the body. Every day, they filter around 180 liters, or roughly 50 gallons of blood, reabsorb essential nutrients and water, and excrete metabolic waste. They regulate blood pressure, balance electrolytes, produce hormones, and help control red blood cell production. But this high metabolic workload comes at a cost. According to a 2018 review by Coppolino, the kidneys are particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress, a state in which the production of reactive oxygen species, or ROS, outpaces the body's ability to neutralize them. ROS are chemically reactive molecules that can damage proteins, lipids, and DNA. In healthy tissue, ROS help regulate normal cell signaling. But in the kidneys, excessive ROS, especially in the presence of diabetes, hypertension, or aging, leads to inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and tissue scarring. What makes kidneys even more susceptible is their unique vascular architecture. The glomeruli, the tiny filtering units, are dense with capillaries and rely on tight autoregulation of blood flow. When ROS accumulate, they impair this regulation, promoting glomerular hypertension and structural damage. Over time, this contributes to a progressive decline in renal function, even if the initial insult, like high blood sugar or pressure, is managed. Building on this, a 2018 paper by Mukhopadhyay and colleagues outlined how oxidative stress doesn't act alone. It triggers and is amplified by inflammation and dysfunctional autophagy, the body's way of clearing out damaged cellular components. In the kidney, impaired autophagy leads to the accumulation of dysfunctional mitochondria and misfolded proteins, which further increase ROS levels. It's a vicious cycle. Oxidative stress begets inflammation, which impairs autophagy, which in turn worsens oxidative stress. This triad, oxidative stress, inflammation, and autophagy failure, has been implicated not just in acute kidney injury, but in chronic diseases like diabetic nephropathy, hypertensive nephrosclerosis, and even age-related kidney decline. What's more, interventions aimed at controlling these processes, particularly ROS, often come with trade-offs. High-dose antioxidants can disrupt normal cell signaling, anti-inflammatories can impair immune function, and many drugs burden the kidneys during metabolism or excretion. And that's why researchers are now looking at gentler, more physiologically compatible molecules, ones that can modulate this damaging cycle without overcorrecting or introducing new stressors. Among these, molecular hydrogen has emerged as an area of interest, precisely because of its small size, selective antioxidant action, and low toxicity. But before we dive into hydrogen's potential role, it's important to understand that the kidney's vulnerability isn't about one cause. It's about constant exposure to metabolic stress coupled with limited capacity for repair. That's what makes kidney health both essential and fragile, and why even small shifts in cellular balance can have big implications over time. When it comes to chronic kidney disease, diabetes is one of the leading causes worldwide. In diabetic nephropathy, prolonged high blood glucose levels trigger a cascade of damaging processes inside the kidneys, especially in the glomeruli, the tiny capillary networks responsible for blood filtration. What makes diabetic nephropathy so difficult to manage is that by the time symptoms show up, like protein in the urine or declining glomerular filtration rate, GFR, much of the structural damage has already occurred. One of the primary drivers of this damage is oxidative stress. In a 2012 study published in Medical Gas Research, Katakura and colleagues investigated the role of hydrogen-rich water in diabetic kidney injury using a specific type of rats. These rats have a mutation that predisposes them to metabolic syndrome, including obesity, insulin resistance, and critically renal dysfunction resembling human diabetic nephropathy. The researchers exposed kidney tissue from these rats to both high glucose and AB dicarbonyl compounds, two agents known to increase reactive oxygen species production in diabetic environments. As expected, the kidney tissues responded with a significant increase in oxidative stress markers, but in the group that consumed hydrogen-rich water, something changed. ROS production was significantly suppressed, not entirely eliminated, but reduced to levels that suggested cellular stress was being buffered. So what does this mean for diabetic kidney disease? It suggests that molecular hydrogen may help interrupt or delay the oxidative stress cycle that drives glomerular damage, not by replacing glucose control or standard therapies, but by adding another layer of defense at the cellular and mitochondrial levels. Of course, it's important to keep context in mind. This was a preclinical study. Rats are not humans, and these findings need to be replicated and expanded upon in larger animal models and controlled human trials. Still, this study laid the groundwork for more research on hydrogen's role in metabolic kidney disease. It raised an intriguing possibility that in the context of complex, slow-progressing conditions like diabetic nephropathy, small, well-tolerated interventions like hydrogen may offer incremental protection that matters over time. Now for a quick word from our sponsor. Your body is a system, and when it's running right, you feel focused, energized, in flow. But sometimes we struggle to find that flow state. Why? Because there's too much static in our system. Brain fog, fatigue, and inflammation. The Echo Flask clears the static by infusing your water with molecular hydrogen, a natural, science-backed gas that helps your body think sharper, recover faster, and run smoother. This is more than hydration. It's better focus, more energy, faster recovery, less internal stress, and long-term benefits that keep you sharp. When your water works harder, your whole system does too. Find your flow state with the Echo Flask hydrogen water bottle and get an unlimited supply of hydrogen water at home and on the go. Visit echowater.com and use code H2Studies to get 10% off of your first order with Echo Hydrogen Water products. If diabetes is one major threat to kidney health, hypertension is the other. In fact, the two often go hand in hand. High blood pressure doesn't just stress the heart, it puts continuous mechanical strain on the delicate blood vessels inside the kidneys. Over time, this can lead to vascular remodeling, glomerular damage, and progressive loss of kidney function. But the effects of hypertension go deeper than just physical pressure. Oxidative stress and inflammation are major contributors to kidney damage in hypertensive individuals even before measurable declines in filtration begin. This is where molecular hydrogen enters the research conversation. In 2014, a team led by Zinn explored the effects of hydrogen-rich water in spontaneously hypertensive rats, an established model for studying hypertension-induced kidney damage. These rats develop high blood pressure naturally over time, closely mimicking the gradual progression of human essential hypertension. The researchers also observed a downregulation of oxidative stress markers in the hydrogen-treated group. This was particularly significant because the rat's blood pressure itself wasn't dramatically altered, meaning the benefit wasn't just from reduced pressure. Instead, hydrogen appeared to protect the kidney at a molecular level, buffering the effects of high pressure rather than eliminating the pressure altogether. This finding aligns with a broader view of hydrogen as a modulator, not a controller. It doesn't override systems. It supports their ability to adapt under stress. Another study, published in 2011 by Zhu, took a slightly different approach. Researchers worked with DAL, salt-sensitive rats, another model prone to hypertension and kidney injury, especially when exposed to high-salt diets. In these rats, ischemia-induced kidney damage was common, mimicking what can happen in humans after blood flow is reduced during surgery, shock, or prolonged hypertension. When these salt-sensitive rats were given water infused with high levels of dissolved hydrogen, they experienced less cardiorenal injury. The hydrogen-treated group had better preservation of renal tissue, less proteinuria, a marker of kidney damage, and lower levels of inflammatory markers. The rats also showed less structural damage in kidney tissue compared to controls. Histological analysis revealed reduced glomerular and tubular injury, lower levels of interstitial fibrosis, and fewer inflammatory cell infiltrates. What's important about both of these studies is that they validate each other. Two different models of hypertension, two different mechanisms of injury, spontaneous innate hypertension in one and salt-induced hypertension in the other. And yet, In both, hydrogen consistently reduced the burden of oxidative and inflammatory damage in the kidneys. Neither study framed hydrogen as a replacement for managing blood pressure. Instead, they suggest that in people already dealing with hypertension or at risk of developing hypertensive kidney disease, hydrogen could act as a complementary protective factor, especially at the microvascular and mitochondrial levels. Again, these are animal studies. They don't replace clinical evidence, but they do give us a proof of concept that hydrogen may help preserve kidney structure and function in high-stress conditions without adding toxicity or workload to an already burdened organ. Chronic kidney disease doesn't develop in isolation. It often emerges as part of a broader metabolic picture, one that includes obesity, insulin resistance, high blood pressure, and abnormal lipid profiles. Together, these factors are known as metabolic syndrome, and they're increasingly common in aging populations. In people with metabolic syndrome, the kidneys are under constant low-grade stress. Insulin resistance and high glucose levels increase oxidative load. Lipid accumulation and hypertension impair blood flow. Over time, this environment leads to progressive kidney damage long before traditional kidney markers like creatinine or GFR slow changes. To study the connection between metabolic problems and kidney health, Hashimoto and his team did a study in 2011. They used a special type of rat that was more likely to develop conditions like obesity, insulin resistance, and early kidney issues, similar to what some people with metabolic syndrome experience. In this study, rats were given hydrogen-rich water daily. Over several weeks, researchers observed not just improvements in metabolic markers, but also changes in kidney-related outcomes. The hydrogen-treated rats had increased plasma total antioxidant capacity, reduced histological damage to the kidneys, lower blood urea nitrogen, BUN, and creatinine concentrations. And this suggests that molecular hydrogen may offer multi-system support, not just buffering oxidative stress, but also improving the metabolic conditions that indirectly affect kidney health. What's striking is that this study focused on pre-disease physiology. The rats weren't in kidney failure, they were at risk, and yet hydrogen helped mitigate some of the early pathological changes that often go unnoticed until it's too late. In this way, it presents a potential preventative role, not just a therapeutic one. A similar preventative theme shows up in another condition tied to metabolic dysfunction, obstructive sleep apnea, OSA. OSA is characterized by repeated drops in oxygen levels during sleep, and these episodes, called chronic intermittent hypoxia, don't just affect the lungs or brain. They also put strain on the kidneys, contributing to both structural and functional decline over time. In 2019, Guan and colleagues studied the effects of hydrogen in a rat model of sleep apnea. These rats were exposed to repeated cycles of low oxygen, mimicking human OSA. Predictably, their kidneys showed signs of damage, increased inflammation, elevated cell death, and impaired autophagy, the process cells use to recycle damaged components. But when these rats were given molecular hydrogen, the picture changed. Apoptosis, cell death, decreased. Autophagy was restored. Renal function stabilized. This suggests that hydrogen not only reduced immediate oxidative injury, but also rebalanced the cell's stress response mechanisms, giving the kidneys a better chance to adapt under hypoxic conditions. Together, these two studies for metabolic syndrome and sleep apnea underscore a key point. Many chronic stressors on the kidney begin outside the kidney, whether it's poor glycemic control, lipid accumulation, or oxygen fluctuations during sleep. The kidneys often suffer secondhand damage. Hydrogen, in these cases, may not fix the root cause, but appears to offer support at the cellular level, helping kidneys cope with stress they didn't create, but still have to endure. So far, most of the research we've discussed has been in rats, useful for understanding mechanisms, but several steps from real-world patient care. That's why human studies, even small ones, are important for connecting lab insights to actual clinical experience. In 2025, a case report published in the Journal of Vivo provided one of the first glimpses into how molecular hydrogen might help people with chronic kidney issues. The study followed an elderly patient with multiple health conditions, including chronic kidney dysfunction, meaning the kidneys weren't working as well as they should. This individual wasn't part of a drug trial or large study group. Instead, the researchers monitored what happened after introducing molecular hydrogen as an adjunct therapy, a supportive addition to the patient's usual care plan. The hydrogen was delivered in a controlled manner, and the patient continued with their existing medications and routines. Over time, the patient experienced improvements in kidney function markers, specifically a reduction in creatinine levels, which reflects how well the kidneys are filtering waste. In addition to this lab improvement, the patient also reported feeling less fatigue, which is one of the most common and debilitating symptoms of chronic kidney disease. Now, it's important to emphasize this was a single case report. It doesn't prove causation. It doesn't replace a randomized clinical trial, but it does provide a valuable early data point, a hint that hydrogen might support kidney function in real-world settings, not just under controlled lab conditions. What makes this particularly promising is how hydrogen behaves in the body. Unlike many compounds used to treat chronic disease, hydrogen doesn't require processing by the kidneys or liver. It's a tiny neutral molecule that diffuses quickly through the tissues, crosses through membranes, and exits through the lungs, and that makes it metabolically light and potentially safe to use in patients with compromised kidney function, where drug clearance is often concerned. In other words, hydrogen fits a critical need, a therapy that can lower oxidative stress and inflammation without adding more burden to an already stressed organ system. What we're seeing here is a pattern. Animal studies show tissue protection, reduction in oxidative stress markers, and improved cellular resilience. And now, in this early human case, we're seeing a parallel, improved biomarkers and better symptom control with no added harm. It's too early to draw big conclusions, but as a stepping stone between bench science and patient care, this case suggests that hydrogen deserves further exploration. Not as a cure, but as a gentle, supportive tool that aligns with the needs of patients living with chronic kidney disease. So what's actually happening when hydrogen interacts with kidney cells? The animal and mechanistic studies that we've looked at suggest that molecular hydrogen doesn't act like a traditional drug. Instead of targeting one receptor or one enzyme, its effects seem to come from supporting core biological systems that help the body adapt to stress. Based on findings from multiple studies, including those on diabetic nephropathy, hypertension, and hypoxia-induced kidney injury, hydrogen's protective role appears to center on three main areas. Antioxidant modulation, one of hydrogen's most well-documented roles, is its ability to act as a selective antioxidant. And oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species, ROS, like hydroxyl radicals and peroxynitrite, accumulate and damage tissues. And not all ROS are bad. Some are needed for normal cell signaling. Here's where hydrogen stands out. Hydrogen-rich water reduces only the most toxic ROS without interfering with the rest of the redox system. That's a big deal. Most antioxidants work broadly and can suppress necessary physiological signals. Hydrogen, by contrast, seems to preserve balance, reducing damage without disrupting cell communication. This targeted modulation of oxidative stress is especially useful in kidney tissue, where ROS are both a cause and a consequence of disease. Inflammation control. Oxidative stress and inflammation often go hand in hand. In kidney disease, inflammation accelerates fibrosis, promotes cell death, and worsens vascular damage. Several studies have shown that hydrogen reduces inflammatory markers like TNF-A and IL-6 and inhibits signaling pathways such as NF-κB, which drives many chronic inflammatory responses. By calming these pathways, hydrogen may interrupt the feedback loop between oxidative stress and inflammation, one of the major engines behind progressive kidney damage. Number 3, support for autophagy and mitochondria. Kidneys are energy-intensive organs. They rely heavily on healthy mitochondria to filter blood, reabsorb nutrients, and regulate ion balance. But when oxidative stress builds up, mitochondria become dysfunctional, and cells can't adapt to stress effectively. This is where autophagy, the body's internal recycling system, plays a role. If autophagy fails, damaged mitochondria accumulate, producing even more ROS and worsening injury. Hydrogen has also been shown to help restore autophagy function in kidney cells exposed to chronic hypoxia. It also reduced apoptosis, or programmed cell death. This suggests that hydrogen may preserve the cell's ability to clean up and repair itself, an essential function for maintaining long-term organ health. These three actions, targeted antioxidant activity, inflammation control, and mitochondrial support, may not be flashy, but together they form a resilient system. Hydrogen isn't trying to override biology, it's helping the body maintain homeostasis under pressure. That's especially relevant in chronic kidney disease, where injury builds slowly and silently. Many of the damaging processes like fibrosis, glomerular stress, and tubular degeneration don't cause symptoms until function is already lost. So no, hydrogen doesn't replace medications. It doesn't directly lower blood pressure or control glucose. But what it may offer is low-risk background support for the systems that help kidneys cope with stress. And for an organ that often suffers in silence, that kind of cellular backup can make a meaningful difference. The kidneys are silent workhorses. They don't complain until the damage is done. That's why prevention matters and why researchers are so interested in low-risk strategies that can help them weather oxidative stress. Molecular hydrogen isn't a miracle treatment, but the research suggests it may be a supportive molecule, one that helps preserve cellular function in a highly oxidative environment, from diabetic nephropathy to hypertension to chronic hypoxia. It appears to offer gentle protection in situations where the kidneys are under constant threat. As always, more research is needed, especially large, well-controlled human studies, but what we know so far is enough to keep the questions coming. Thanks for tuning into the Hydrogen Studies podcast. If you found today's episode thought-provoking, feel free to share it or reach out with questions. You can also access all studies mentioned in these episodes on hydrogenstudies.com. Until next time, stay healthy, stay curious, and we'll see you soon.